my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys, welcome back to r/EntitledPeople, where some people seem to think that they can do what they want, when they want, because they deserve it. And in today's episode, you'll be hearing about entitled bosses. And one person shares a story about the time their store was robbed, and guys, you won't believe what the boss does. I hope you enjoy the stories today. Don't shake your heads too hard. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So I was recently reminded of something that happened a long time ago. Now I'm married now, but this was when I got engaged, and my husband had given me a beautiful ring with a small cluster of diamonds. I was showing some of my colleagues who complimented how beautiful it was. And that's when my boss walks up to me asking what the commotion was about. I then show her my ring, and that's when she wrinkles her nose like she doesn't like it or something. And then she walks away. After a while, she approaches me and she asked if I have warranty on the ring. I say yes, and that's when she basically orders me to remove the diamonds and to give them to her. I of course laughed, thinking she was joking, but she looked at me straight-faced and she repeated herself. She told me to remove the cluster of diamonds on my ring, to give them to her, and then I can claim a replacement ring. At that, I just looked at her and I realized she wasn't joking. I told her I wasn't going to do that. She then just walks off in a huff. Now, I have many crazy stories about her because she's done some crazy things. The company was once given rugby tickets by a client and they were offered to me. She was so pissed that she told me to not come back to work. Some people. You know, the outrageous things that self-entitled people demand never ceases to amaze me, guys. Like, just take off the diamonds and give them to me and claim warranty. Say they just fell off or something. Like, asking an employee to basically commit that level of fraud is absolutely shocking. And honestly, I'd be wondering what other shady things she's been getting away with as the manager of that place. With that said, I also feel like her ideal team building event might be having her employees rob a bank or something. Like OP said, some people. I'm a 30-year-old female working at a small business. We have a manager who's been working here since the business opened, and she has her own favorites in the office. Now, these favorites are allowed to break every rule and do whatever they want without being questioned. Those who are not her favorites are always under scrutiny and loaded with work responsibilities that are to be done by her favorites. Well, since I started the job, for whatever reason, she's made me the target of her hate. I'm always respectful to her. However, she likes to make my life hell over everything. Like, initially, I was given work responsibilities equivalent to 4 people's work. And she always throws tantrums like kids every time I get time off. She goes the extra mile to create issues on days I'm off and blame everything on me. She's even made issues when I was hospitalized, and then ask our boss why I got special treatment. With that said, I'm going on a long vacation. I told my boss about my plans and I had it pre-approved even before making any bookings for anything. I put it on the calendar 3 months in advance with a note that it's been pre-approved. Now, my manager was supposed to take a few days off so she could have an extra long weekend. However, our owner said that she would be off that week as well. And here's the thing. The owner didn't ask the manager to cancel her time off or whatever, but my manager took it upon herself and she canceled her few days off. Being the suck-up she is, she wanted to, quote, stay on top of things. Well, after doing that, she turns towards me, and she told me in these exact words that, quote, since I have to cancel my days off, I'm canceling your vacation as well, which is scheduled 2 months from now. She then marches off with a smug smirk on her face. I just looked at her, thinking, what the F? I then went to her desk, which is right outside where the big boss is, and I told her out loud that she may cancel my vacation time. However, she has to refund the money I spent booking my flights, my hotels, my activities, which are non-refundable, and that amount totals to well over $3,000, plus whatever my boyfriend spent too. I also said it'll be something she needs to do out of her pocket, since the owner boss is not asking me to cancel, but she is. The owner knows how she is, and that she's been playing games with me since the beginning. The owner approached me later and just gave out a laugh at how I handled it. And guess what? I'm still going on vacation. I'm also going through everyday torture of her petty comments about my vacation. But I'm gonna count it as a victory, as small as it is. Man, I am so glad that OP stood up for herself and let that Karen manager have it. Like the nerve of her to give up her few days off without being asked to, and then cancel OP's whole vacation. Like what an a-hole move that was. And seriously, with how petty that Karen was for the 2 months leading up to OP's vacation, I only hope OP came back and was constantly telling everyone in the office how great her vacation was. I mean, it's only fair, right? Okay, so this was over 20 years ago, but I'll never forget it. I used to work in the office of a manufacturing plant. There was a group of 4 of us, 4 females, that would pitch in to buy lunch stuff for the week. We would make a list on Friday, and then one of us would shop Monday morning, and then bring it in with us. We even bought a sandwich maker and toaster to keep us from getting bored. Now, we had been doing this for months, when suddenly, the food wouldn't last the week anymore. The first time, we chalked it up to us being hungrier than normal, and we just moved on. By week number 3, we decided that we would just buy more stuff, and we did. But again, it ran out fast, and we were really confused. One day, I went to grab something from the break room, and there's all of our bags on the table, and the plant manager's making a ridiculously large sandwich. When I asked her what she was doing, she said she's making a sandwich. I then asked if anyone told her she could make one from our lunch stash. At that, she answers no. And then she went on to say that she found these bags of groceries in the fridge, and she had been doing it for weeks. I then let her know that those groceries were ours because we were trying to save money, but now we know why our food was running out so fast. She just said she didn't know they were ours. She thought that somebody bought them in for everyone and they just left it in the fridge. I asked why she didn't find out who they belonged to first, and she just looked at me like a deer in headlights. When I let my coworkers know, they were pissed. One of them said she knew they were our groceries because she had asked my coworker why she had so much food one day. We then stopped the lunch group that week and we started bringing food from home. A couple of weeks later, the plant manager asked me where the groceries were, because she hasn't been able to make sandwiches for a while now. I just let her know that we couldn't afford to keep feeding people that made more than we did. Okay, that is some crazy entitlement right there. Like the fact that she was even asking about the groceries after OP told her it was theirs means she fully intended to keep robbing them. Like that is absolutely wild. And I've worked in many different places, and I'm so glad I've never encountered a food thief before. And get this, OP comes into the comments and they added that the plant manager was actually friends with the owner, so she literally thought that she could do whatever she wanted. And if you thought that was over the top, this person comments, so the craziest story I've ever heard about entitled food thieves was from my boyfriend. His mom works in a school, and she was telling some of the teachers how my boyfriend did video editing for fun. Well, this one entitled teacher then volunteered him to come in and film and edit a video of all the staff dancing to Gangnam Style, the trend at the time. Now, my boyfriend didn't want to do it, but against his better judgment, he decided to go in for one day, and one day only. So he brought his lunch and chocolate milk in, and he was told to put it in the staff fridge. He then spent all morning chasing teachers around because nobody was ready or prepared, and people kept wandering off. He finally gave up, and he said he would film it after lunch, but if they weren't ready, he was leaving. He then discovers his lunch gone. So upon returning to the gym to film, he sees the same entitled teacher drinking his chocolate milk. Of course, he asked her where she got it, and she says, "I found it in the fridge." He then tells her that that was a part of his lunch, and she goes, "Oh, the sandwich was great. You should bring another one when you come back tomorrow. I always hate my salad." This is literally too much entitlement for me to process. My head just spins in anger like the Exorcist girl when he tells it. Man, I've said this before, I cannot stand food thieves. Like how some people eat food that doesn't belong to them is absolutely mind-boggling to me. Like if you didn't bring it, why eat it? If you hate your salad so much, Karen, why are you not bringing something else? Like common sense, people. So my mother-in-law passed away last Christmas Eve. Sadly, she had been battling cancer and she was in remission. She then took a fall and broke her pelvis. She had an internal bleed and the doctors didn't notice it, so that's how she passed. It was so sudden, and when we got the news, my husband and I were scrambling to find our way up there because we lived across the country. Our only vehicle was a super old pickup that crapped itself just before this happened, and because of this, we weren't able to be a part of the funeral planning, but thankfully, we made it up there the day before, with the help of his best friend. The viewing and funeral were the same day, so as we walked up to the funeral home, my husband notices her ex-boss, who we'll call Greg, because that's his name, and I just wanted to say, "Hi Greg, you're a giant D-bag." So here's some information about her ex-boss. The guy was a giant piece of crap. She worked for him for the county, and this man was so useless that she hated him with a passion. He would call her his work wife, and he would joke that he couldn't do anything without her. And the guy really couldn't. She was doing both her and his job. She even built the database that the entire county uses to track all the money spent on the various bills. After she left, the secretary that replaced her ends up getting Greg fired because she quickly found out that he couldn't do his job because my mother-in-law had been doing it for him. She worked for him during the early 2000s when my husband was in high school. This is important. During this time, her husband, my father-in-law, was diagnosed with cancer. He battled it for years, but eventually passed away from it January 2011. Now, the only reason my mother-in-law put up with his crap and the job was because she needed the health insurance for her husband's chemo since he couldn't work. Now, the thing is, Greg knew that, and he took full advantage because he knew she couldn't afford to lose her job. During the times her husband was in rough shape and she had to take off work to care for him, her boss would send her home with work because he couldn't do any of it himself. Her husband was literally dying from cancer, and her entitled boss was still sucking every last drop of work out of her that he could. He was, and still is, a very crappy person. So with that said, fast forward to the funeral. She hadn't worked for him in like 6 years, and to see him there was a slap to the face. Now, I'm not sure how funeral processions work in other countries, but in the States, there's a very specific order. First is obviously the hearse. After that is the closest living relatives, and since my husband was an only child and his father passed, he was the closest living relative. Now, she did have 3 brothers, so they followed in the car behind ours, and then her cousin, and then everyone else. So as we're making our way to the cemetery, I see somebody cut in front of her brothers. I turn around, and lo and behold, it's her ex-boss, and I was pissed. The guy then tries to cut in front of us, like who the heck does this? You're her ex-boss that she hated. My husband and her brothers were family, and I thought it couldn't get worse, but it did. So since we couldn't make it up there till the day before the funeral, we didn't have a say in the preacher who did her eulogy, and the guy was trash. He stumbled on his words, he quarter-assed it, and obviously didn't know anything about her. It was so awkward. But after he spoke, just before my husband gets a chance to stand up and speak about her, her ex-boss stands up. The guy then starts talking loudly about Maria, and all the good work she did working for him, and how she was his work wife. I still gag thinking about this. The guy literally talked at length about his work with the county and how they help the community, the whole time just patting himself on the back. All the while, I was fuming as I knew all of his work was done by my mother-in-law. The guy basically talked for 15 minutes straight about himself. But the mother effing icing on the cake was when he said that her work for him when my husband was a teenager directly inspired her to adopt my husband from Paraguay when he was a baby. Like, the guy was so self-absorbed that he thought that what he did was so important that it inspired her to adopt 15 years earlier. I was squeezing my husband's hand so hard during this that I was about to break it. We didn't say anything out of respect for his mom. But this is why I say, when I die, please tell everyone I hate off. Let them know exactly how I feel, and even throw hands. I don't give an F. Man, that was such an a-hole move by Greg, and a cringe a-hole move nonetheless. Like, I just hate knowing the fact that mother-in-law despised him so much over the years, and the guy ended up getting the last words in at her funeral, and he praised himself. Like, what a disgusting human being. And I know it's not a time and place to do that, but I wish he was publicly shamed at that point. Like, just call the guy out on his BS. So, a long time ago, I had the displeasure of working for the worst boss ever. I worked at a small cafe owned by a grouchy woman, and how I stayed for 6 grueling years I'll never know. In those 6 years, I've got hundreds of stories, but this one stays with me since it was the first one to happen right after I quit. First off, my reason for quitting was that the owner wouldn't accommodate my one simple request, to leave through the back exit, due to my abusive ex waiting for me outside every single day. Every day, I would come to work in an Uber to avoid walking into him, and every day, the guy would come in, order something, and then sit for hours just staring at me until my shift would end. He would then follow me outside the door and try to harass me while I'd got inside an Uber, to only then show up on my apartment to keep threatening me or break windows. Now, I begged my boss for a solid month to let me leave through the back door after my shift, to get a head start on my ride. And every single time, my boss would tell me no. She would tell me that I was overreacting. I basically got sick of constantly wondering what day would be the day that he'd come there with a gun or something. So I told my supervisor if she wouldn't let me leave through the back exit, then I would quit. At that, she laughed in my face. So I walked out of there, saying I was never coming back. After dealing with unemployment for a week, I get this phone call. Let's call my ex-boss, Karen. She basically calls me and says, "So, when are you coming back into work? Because you've been gone about a week and we're short-staffed. You'd better be here in 45 or you're fired." I tell her, remember the last time I worked with you, what happened? I walked out of there telling you I wasn't coming back. Karen responds, "Yeah, that was over a week ago. Have you calmed down now? You can't keep playing these games. Your boyfriend hasn't been here either, so you can relax." I just tell her, "Yeah, no, I told you that since you can't accommodate my one request, I would quit." She then yells at me and says, "You are coming in, because if you're not, I'm gonna write you up and I'll make sure you never work anywhere again." I tell her I quit. What part of that don't you understand? It ends with her screaming at me and her saying, "You have 30 minutes. I just hung up the phone. Obviously I didn't go in, but I did block her number. I did have the time of my life, greeting random coworkers that she would send to my house to try and get them to bring me into work. The woman was nuts. My coworkers just got a kick out of getting paid to walk 45 minutes to my house to chill. The ex was taken care of legally, and since I've moved, I don't worry about that anymore. But memories of that conversation are always in my mind. Yeah, it's a good thing OP got out of there because that Karen sounds horrible to work for. Like, why would you not accommodate somebody who's asking to leave through the back to avoid a potentially dangerous person? Like, I really don't get that. And the nerve of her to call OP after they quit to harass her and then send employees to her house to do what? Make her come back to work? And it really has me thinking, guys, maybe this insane Karen didn't accommodate OP's request about her stalker ex because she herself is also an effing stalker. Ain't that something? So I'm not entirely sure if this qualifies as an entitled person story or just somebody who's mentally insane. Anyways, the time this happened, I worked for a small hardware store in my city. A bit about me is I'm 6'2", chubby, but still muscular from all the heavy lifting I do, inside and out of work. When this happened, it was early morning, and me and Nancy, my 49-year-old boss, were at the store, opening to do inventory. It was about an hour before opening, and Nancy went outside to grab something from her car. She then came back inside a few minutes later at gunpoint with somebody walking behind her in a mask, just shouting at me to go with them. Now, I've never been involved in any kind of robbery before, aside from minor shoplifting attempts, so I just froze in place. The guy was waving his gun around, screaming at me, telling me to keep my hands visible and to follow them. Nancy was technically the opening manager, and therefore she had keys to the store and the vault in the back office. So he held me up while she emptied it for him. The guy was gone in about 10 minutes, but that felt like an eternity. Our store also doesn't have any kind of silent alarm. So once we were sure he was gone, I went and called 911. After I get off the phone, Nancy comes marching up to me and she says, word for word, "What the F is wrong with you? I should fire you for being so useless." Now, of course, hearing her say that, I stare at her completely caught off guard, and I asked her what she was talking about. She then proceeds to rant at me up and down until the police arrive. To sum up her rant, she basically said that I was a pathetic excuse of a man for not protecting a single mom when she was in danger. I asked her what she expected me to do in that situation. She then said she expected me to try and wrestle the gun away from him so he couldn't hurt her. It was around that point the police arrived to take statements and to ensure we were okay. That day after was my scheduled day off. I came back and I ended up learning what they found out from the investigation. And to be honest, I was angry when I found out. The store manager told me that while they were reviewing the parking lot cameras, they found out that the gunman and Nancy were connected, and that Nancy's been arrested for assisting in robbing the store. Now, I can't go into extreme detail, but according to my boss, the guy was seen exiting Nancy's car when she went outside. They then spoke for a bit before walking up to the store. I also learned the guy was her boyfriend. And yes, she traumatized someone 20 years younger than her for a few $1,000s. And seriously, even now when I still think about it, I don't know if she was chewing me out about the single mom thing because she hoped I would have done something to warrant getting shot over. All I know is that my boss at the time, this woman who did my hiring interview, is mentally insane. So here's the fallout. Nancy's boyfriend is in prison for numerous charges, not contained solely to the robbery. That's the easiest part of this to explain, and the rest just gets weird. I was asked to meet with Nancy and her attorney as she wanted to speak with me. I refused because I hated her. I wasn't willing to speak with her, let alone look at her. A few days after, my company rep told me that he had an email from Nancy meant for me. He reviewed it and he agreed to pass it along to me if I wanted to read it. Against my better judgment, I said yes, and wow, it got crazy. The email was a letter of apology to me. Nancy's boyfriend was this incredibly abusive drug user who had her too afraid of him to leave or to call the police. The robbery was his idea and she was forced to go along with it. She then apologized for her rant to me, claiming it was because in her mind, she believed that I would have stepped in to save her somehow from this abusive boyfriend of hers. I contacted my rep back, telling him to reply that I appreciate her apology and I'm sorry for what she went through, but I'll never forgive her for putting me through that, and to never contact me again when all said and done. The last I heard, she was taking a plea deal. As for Nancy, I do believe her apology was sincere. There was additional info revealed via my company rep and the letter that shows the abuse she was suffering was real, but I won't go into specifics out of respect for her. Okay, what a wild story that was, and to learn that OP's boss was in on the robbery, that was quite the shocker. Like, I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything that happened because it sounded so insane. Like, did OP's boss really go through with that in the hopes that OP, being a big guy, would fight that dude, disarm him, and then have the guy thrown in jail? I don't know. And here's the thing, guys. Like, if she knew the robbery was planned and was being forced into it, why not call the cops about it instead of going through with it and putting OP's life in danger, all in hopes that he would man up and beat her boyfriend to a pulp? Like, I really have no idea though. Guys, let me know what you think in the comments. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy, crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled people episode. Another one where psycho Karens think they rule the world and they're just getting arrested left and right. Guys, go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.